All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to week one of our 7M writing class. My name is Sabina, as you probably watched my first video. I just want to go over how to approach week one, and I want to go over what you guys should be doing and focusing on for this week. So today we're going to talk about discussion boards. How do they work? And then we're also going to talk about the BEAM assignment coming up. What is it and how do you start if you want to know? So first I kind of want to go over how you would generally approach week one or any week of class for that matter. So you're going to start with the overview of the class when you go to Canvas. You're going to click Next to get a sense of the kinds of assignments to do throughout the week. I would love for you to just kind of go through and see, okay, what do I have to do this week to help you manage your time? And then even if an assignment is on a page and there's nothing to submit, you should still do what the page says to do so that you don't have to do it later. So you can kind of get it out of the way now. So I want to demo this for you so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. So let's say you are home, you go to the home page. You can see me, there's my lovely picture, and then we're going to week one, okay? So we're starting on week one. So you can start with the overview here, and this video will be posted here. So you'll look at this review section. How is writing a way of participating in conversations? How do education scholars view reading, writing, and language connections? So those are the topics we're going to be talking about this week. So first you're going to review, back at your notes for Tinto's Reflections article. Now that you've experienced all of your classes for this quarter, where do you feel your challenges will be? Attaining a sense of belonging, believing you can overcome, right? So this is just kind of to think. This isn't really an assignment that you have to complete. It's just kind of a food for thought. I want you to review that article and start thinking about it because it is sort of the basis of this whole class. So then you can watch this preview video that I'm going to post now. And then we're going to start looking at BEAM, okay? So you have a couple options. You can click on this now, or you'll hit it if you see we're gonna get to it in 1.2, so you don't have to click on it right away. And then I have the 3 assignments due, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You have discussion 1, a response, and a revisit. I'm gonna go over what those mean. So then I encourage you just to kind of click through and see what you have to do. So here's your first discussion, how to read like a writer, understanding writing situations. Okay, I'm supposed to pick one. Write a post, blah, blah, blah. Great. Some people have already posted, which is great. Okay, here's an assignment overview. Looks like there's a video, some things to read. Got it. So notice how I'm just kind of looking through. Okay, discussion number 1. I'm going to go back to it and respond to somebody. Discussion and then a revisit. I'm going to revisit that and then, oh look, I'm already on week 2. So you can kind of see just by clicking through that week 1 is kind of light, but there's still a fair amount that I want you to do as you go through week 1. So that's how you would sort of approach it. So I want to now go over a little more in depth. How do you do a discussion board? And I'm going to show you a couple of sample responses just so you can kind of see what you're supposed to write. So every week for the first 6 weeks of the semester, or the quarter, sorry, we will have a discussion board that you'll be required to submit and respond to. So on Mondays, you do your very first submission. Wednesdays, you do what's called a response. And then Fridays, you do what's called a revisit. And I'm going to show you examples of each of these in this video. Usually there's also going to be readings that you're expected to respond to in your discussion. So it's not just your thoughts. Think of this as kind of like the discussion that we would normally have in class, talking about readings that were assigned for homework. So a lot of you are probably thinking, well, how do I write a good discussion post? How do I write a good response to a classmate? I'm not really sure how to do these things. So the post is probably pretty self-explanatory. So I want to kind of focus on the response to a post because I think a lot of you are going to be thinking, well, how do I respond to somebody? So a good response is going to expand on a point that the other person already wrote about, usually. So if they wrote that they agreed with the author for a reason that you also said, you can kind of say, oh yeah, you agree, and then expand on what the original person said. So you don't just say, I agree with you. Tell me why do you agree with that point? Did this remind you of something else? Was there another idea or another reading that you thought you could connect this to, or another thought that you have in person about how it's connected? So I want to just show you an example of what an original post, a response, and a revisit might look like. So this is much shorter than what you are expected to write because it's between 250 to 300 words, but this is kind of the general gist. If we're going to go back to discussion number 1, okay? So if I take a moment and I look at what is under discussion number 1, so you can see you're supposed to choose one of these 2 readings. So how to read like a writer or understanding writing situations. Okay. If you want to, you don't have to, but like I said, I highly recommend that you complete this reading organization chart as you read. So this is just something you can use to kind of organize as you're reading. So you would put the title here and you would put your notes about what you're reading as you read it. Okay. You're going to read it 2 or 3 times, take notes in the reading organization chart or somewhere else. Then you'll write the post introducing the text and the author to the reader and describing your reading experience. So when did you start understanding? When did you not understand? When did you start to understand? When did you have complete understanding? Focus on your reading process. So you're not going to just tell me, oh, the reading is about this. You're actually going to be telling me, well, as I was reading it, I only started to really understand what was in the reading at this section because of this thing that I did. Okay, so what did you do to comprehend the text? And then you're going to end with what's called an open-ended question. So this is a question that will allow somebody to respond to what you just wrote. I really encourage you to give me something nice and broad, like a why, a what, or a how question, something like that. That will really allow the other person to respond very in depth to what you've already said. Okay? So let's say I'm going to be responding to that post. So I'll write, let's say I read How to Read Like a Writer by Mike Bunn. So I'll say something like, the article How to Read Like a Writer by Mike Bunn talks about the way in which you can read for the purpose of writing to improve your writing, rather than just for fun. He encourages the students to ask questions, why they read, thinking about the purpose for writing, and how good or appropriate evidence or arguments are. I feel as though as I was reading the article, at first I had to stop often and write down words I wasn't sure of, or reread several sentences. But when he got to what are questions to ask as you're reading, I felt like I understood the article more. And then here's my open-ended question. Have you ever had experience with reading to write or any of the things he talks about? So it's pretty short for an original post, but it's kind of the general idea of what I'm looking for. Then let's say this is a response. Okay, so somebody read my post, and this is the response that they would write to my post. Yes, I also felt like things weren't as clear for me until I got to that section. So see how you're agreeing with what they said? And now you're going to expand. I feel as though when I got to the section about looking for the purpose of the article, I tried to use it on this article and found that I was able to see that the purpose is to teach me something. If I look at this compared to BEAM, this is your assignment coming up, I think this may be an example of method, right? So you're just going to kind of write, yes, here's how I felt, and you're going to add a little bit more. So then finally, I'm the person who wrote the original post. I'm going to revisit what someone wrote in addition to what I wrote and kind of summarize what I said. So to summarize both of our points, I think we were able to find the purpose of this reading and potentially categorize it for BEAM. Hopefully this reading will help us complete the big project. So that's kind of what you want to do. Each post kind of has a different idea. So your original post, you're answering the question in the discussion about the readings, and then you post an open-ended question. Your response, you're really responding to the question as well as the ideas that the author put in their post. So not just the questions, but also the post. Finally, you're going to summarize your post as well as any response that you received and kind of add a final comment about the importance of what you said. So that's the general idea for discussions, and that's what you're going to do every week for the first 6 weeks of the quarter. Now I want to talk a little bit about your upcoming BEAM assignment, and I want to show you how you should approach this. We're going to talk very in depth about it, so don't worry too much, but I do really encourage you to take time in understanding this and writing down some questions you may have to ask me, okay? So during week 3 is when we're really going to begin writing the first draft of your BEAM project. But before we begin, I want to give you the opportunity to go over what it is for a few weeks so that you get a good idea of it. So now I'm going to show you just on Canvas what I'm looking for. So you did your first discussion. We're going to go to next. This is where it says the BEAM assignment overview. So notice BEAM stands for background, exhibit, argument, and method. Okay, so what I highly recommend you do here is watch this video. Okay, you can take notes as you watch the video. It might be really helpful. And then I want you to take a look at this little link that I gave you here, which is sort of talking about how we use BEAM in our writing. Now, this is kind of a heavy article. It's 16 pages. It's a lot. But I highly recommend you take notes as you read this article, only because this can help you understand what is BEAM and why we use it a little bit more. Finally, the big important thing that I want to go over is what is the BEAM project. So I actually have it open here. If we go to this. So what you're going to be doing is kind of 2 parts. You have a curated collection for this assignment. So what are you going to be doing? Identify and apply writing strategies, make strategic decisions to effectively use source materials in your writing, and use language strategically and stylistically to achieve purpose. So I want to really show you that we put a lot of thought into making this document to help you guys really understand it. So what you're going to do is create what's called a curated collection. You're going to choose articles that we read in class, and you're going to analyze them using this BEAM structure that we give you, okay? So the curated collection will demonstrate your understanding and analysis of how writers use a particular rhetorical strategy. So essentially what we're doing with this project is you're going to read articles and tell me that you know what the writer's purpose and thought process in articles and evidence are. You're going to tell me, yes, I understand how this article was written and why it was written, and you're going to do that using this BEAM idea. So notice I included this link that has a nice little link here to even more information on what we're doing with BEAM. So this talks about evaluating sources rhetorically using these ideas, and then under the influence of BEAM, background or exhibits, argument or method. Okay? So this is kind of the idea of how you're going to talk about the ways that we use sources. You're going to tell me which articles fit into which categories as you go. So this collection will have what's called an introductory rationale to present your understanding of the BEAM strategy collection. So what is a rationale? I gave you a link right here. So if we go here, this has a lovely explanation of what is the rationale. So we're going to talk a little bit about rationale as well, more later, but this is kind of an introduction to that, okay? So then if we go back to this, you have a rationale, 3 visual examples or excerpts from course readings. Each should clearly show the reader the strategic source you are illustrating. 2 can be from the same source. Each must have a 100-word analysis of how the writer is using this evidence of the strategy in context. So notice that you're going to choose 3 examples or bits from your course readings to show, is this an example of background, exhibit, right, or method, or argument. Background, exhibit, argument, or method. Which one is it? Okay. Then it has information about what you're going to have. So here's your rationale. Why did you choose these things, right? And then you're going to analyze them in this way. So your analysis, you're going to describe what is being used, right? And you're going to explain how the source is being used in the text. Be clear and direct. It shouldn't be wordy or repetitive, right? And then we're also looking for formatting. There is another second half of this assignment, which is the use it as. So the first part is you're just talking about 3 sources and you're talking about how they are being used, okay? So you're going to take 3 examples or excerpts from course readings and talk about the strategy that we talk about with BEAM. The second half is you're going to actually take one of the sources and use it in your own writing, applying the strategy that you talked about. So if your collection focuses on exhibit, you're going to choose a text from the course and use it as an exhibit to show your own claim. So you're going to go from basically reading and showing me how you're an active reader, right? Just like the readings we talk about in the discussion. And now you're going to use it in your writing. So we'll go over that more later as well. But this is just so you can have a brief introduction to the BEAM assignment. So I highly recommend you take some time, watch this video, read this article, look at this assignment sheet, and really just start going in and seeing if you understand what this BEAM assignment is. Week 2, we're going to do a lot more with it. So don't worry too much if you're still pretty fuzzy. I do plan on making a much more in-depth video going over the BEAM assignment in a lot of detail. This is just for week 1. Okay. So to wrap up, I just want to make sure that you guys are very careful when you approach week 1, because you may be tempted to just do the assignments that you have to submit and then ignore the pages. I highly recommend you just do all of the little links, right? Click on the links, watch the videos, do all of that now, because if you don't do it now, pretty soon you're going to be very, very confused, okay? So I highly recommend you go through and just go through each link and at least browse. You don't necessarily have to take notes on everything, but I highly recommend you just look at it and make a mental note and say, okay, I know where that is for future reference. All right, good luck. Hopefully I'll see some of you in my office hours soon.